right, you guys, welcome back. We're going to talk about for loops. So the big difference between a while loop and a for loop is a for loop's built for iteration. So instead of just having one condition, it's actually got three separate statements inside of it. So it has an initialization, because usually, like if you were making a while loop to cycle through something, you'd say like, here's an int counter that starts at 0, and then you would say while some condition like counter is less than 100 is true, then go ahead and do something, right? Like system.out.println, and maybe let's just print counter, right? So we're just counting from 0 up to 99 because I didn't do or equal to. And then the third line that usually happens, right, is you start the value, you check if you should run the loop, and then you also want to increase it. So counter equals counter plus 1, or what we're going to do, right, is we're going to change this to counter plus equal 1, or even better, since it's adding just 1, we're just going to go counter plus plus. Well, what the for loop does is it combines all of those three common lines in a while loop into a single statement, okay? So the basic example for a for loop here is you have for, and then in the parentheses where the while loop usually just has the condition, you actually have three separate statements. So you separate them with semicolons, not with commas. So that's one of the most common mistake, is because all methods and functions take in an input, comma, input, comma, input. These are actual code statements, right? Like you're taking this statement, semicolon and all, and putting it in there, right? So for a for loop, I would do this exact same for loop like this. I would go for, and then I would take literally this statement, including the semicolon, and I would say, okay, so that's my starting value. I am creating a local variable that only exists in the for loop. I guess instead of cutting, I'll leave that up there, and then I'll paste this down here. Then I take the condition next, because it's in order, 1, 2, 3, right? So I take the condition that I would have normally put, I put it there with a semicolon, and then down below I also take this, and I don't need a semicolon there because I'm just going to end with the parentheses. So I'm taking those three commands and putting them all here. So this is in order. It goes initialize, so that's the starting value, and then it is the condition of whether it should run, and then after that we call this incrementing or decrementing. So incrementing is steadily rising, and decrementing or decrementing is slowly going down. So those are the three things you set up for a for loop, and then you can run your code in here, right? And so for this one I could just go system.out.println and print the counter. So we get the exact same result for both loops. And just to check it, let's get a program structure up and going here. So let's make this a class. Whoa, that's not how you spell class. For loops, okay? And then I'm going to end that bracket down here. I'm also going to create my main. So that's a public static void main. We've got a bunch of strings. So that's a collection right there of strings called arguments. And then we start. And so I'm going to take all this, highlight it, and go tab, tab to put the right indentation. And then I'm going to end my main, okay? So these nice red dotted lines show me the main ends here and the class ends there. Okay, so I'm going to save this right here as under 411. I'm going to call this exactly like the class name, for loops, Java. Okay. All right, I'm wondering if anybody sees the little error I've got here. Okay, so I'm going to go Java C for loops.java, and there was the error, right? I actually copied and pasted the exact same variable name, so I can't create something with the same name a second time. Really common, the variable name that people use for just for iteration is the I, right? So, whoops, just deleted it. So we'll start with int I equals 0. Then we'll say as long as I is less than 100, keep going. And then we're going to go I++. So in other words, add 1 each time, okay? And I'll just backspace this so it matches up a little better. But all right, let's go. Let's save it. So I've got a blue up here. It's all updated and saved. Let's compile it. Now let's Java for loops this. And what we end up getting is why did it? Oh, silly me. I changed I everywhere but 1. Okay, so it correctly starts at 0 and goes up to 99. The first loop ends. And then silly me down here, I said, let's print counter. And so counter, after that last time of 99, it goes up to 100. It decides this loop should not run. And then I just printed counter a bunch of times. So let's change that to I. This is now red, so let's save it. Let's go up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this to print. And I'm going to change this to print. And I'm just going to add a little space afterwards. And so this is all going to be on one single line just so we don't scroll down a ton. And then right in between, I'll put a single system.out.print line in there just to create some space. Okay, so what we got here is 2 loops that do the exact same thing. Starting at 0, they go to 99. Starting at 0, they go to 99. But you can see how combining these 3 pieces into a single for loop makes iteration much easier. Now, common usages for this are often if you have an array or a list or any collection of things, this is a really easy way to cycle through them, right? So for example, maybe you've got every single character of a string that you want to cycle through, or you just have any collection of anything to go through, or maybe you need to numerically go through some values, right? Maybe you need to go up by 5 or down by 2 and collect all those numbers for some reason. But anytime you're iterating over a collection of things, or doing 100 steps, regardless of what those 100 steps are, then the for loop is your friend, because it automatically, with one quick line, will do 100 things, right? I mean, this literally right here runs 100 times. And so you could do anything you wanted 100 times. You could 100 times put a coin into a video game bucket or something like that, or play a sound effect. But this is essentially a quick way of saying repeat 100 times. Now let's look at a couple common mistakes here, because that's the basic structure of it. One really common mistake is people forget the scope. So this is a local variable I here. So if I try and down here after the loop is over, go system.out.println, I wonder what the value of I is after this loop, right? I'm curious. So I can go up here, and when I try and compile it, it says, whoa, it can't find this symbol. And you'd have to look and you'd say, well, why can't it find this symbol? It's because it only exists in this for loop. You created it inside the for loop block. And so when it gets to this last bracket, it is dereferenced. So it's still written in memory somewhere, but you don't have a pointer to access it anymore. All right, so that's a common mistake, is people forgetting the scope that's really particular in Java and C-derived languages. Another one is, just messing up the condition so their loop never starts. As I walk around with students, it's really common that people say, why is my loop running? And I'm like, well, you started at 0 and you said run as long as it's bigger than 5. And often what it is people get the logical negation. They're like, well, I want it to stop when it's bigger than 5. And so what you would have to do is say, well, I want it to run, the positive, I want it to go when it's less than or equal to 5. And then I want it to stop when it gets past 5, right? So often kids flip that and they get a loop that never runs at all. Another one here is, which one is this? Oh yeah, I already mentioned this. Really common is separating by commas, right? Every function, every method, every constructor, everything you use in Java is separated by commas inside parentheses. And this is the one thing that has those semicolons, because they're statements, right? You're declaring a new variable set equal to 0, semicolon, right? That's the command. What's another one here? Classic. Put the semicolon at the end here. So people get, often, especially beginners, right? They start the bracket down here. Great habit. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But just like with the while loop, or with an if statement, if you put a semicolon at the end of this, what you're essentially saying is, okay, I want to, repeat 100 times. That's what this does. You have this variable I, but it's repeat 100 times, really. And what I want to do each time is nothing. That's my one thing I want to do. Go. And so what this does is it goes, okay, sure, boss. It runs. It goes 100 times, doing absolutely nothing. The end. And then it runs this line of code, or this block of code, not attached to the loop at all. It's the next line in code. Why'd you put it in brackets? Don't know, it doesn't matter. But this loop is now done, right? It said for, and it gave all the loop instructions, and these were the instructions that you executed each of those 100 times. And this would actually cause an error because you're trying to reference I, and it would say, oh, I only existed right here inside the for loop, right here when you were executing commands. That's where I existed. I is now done when it got to the end, that semicolon, and so this would cause an error that there's no such thing as I. Same thing up here in the while loop, except here you don't have the incrementing built in. So here you'd create a counter at 0 and say while 0 is less than 100, then do nothing, right? This is the instructions to do for the loop, and so you'd be trapped in a forever loop, and that would never break. It would just hang, and you would be like, why can't I type anything? Why is my program stuck? And it's because it's repeating forever because it never got to this instruction to go up by 1. And if this ever broke, then it would just run this once because it's not attached to the loop. This was the one thing that the loop was running. So that is definitely a common mistake. What's another one? Oh yeah, we already mentioned that. You can't refer to this local variable once the loop is done. Once the loop is done, you've lost reference to it. All right, you guys. That's a for loop. Hope you enjoyed it. The next video is going to be me just running through some problem solving. So I'll take a couple problems and just talk them through and solve them and then leave that up there. And I think just that process of seeing a problem on a blank slate and then how would we tackle that with a for loop or with a while loop, I think that would be helpful for some people. All right.